Hello, this is Miss Hook. Today I'm going to be going over Section 4. Section 4 contains spelling pages 232 and 234, as well as grammar pages 235 and 236. I'm going to start with page 232. Page 232 is on the suffixes full, less, ness, and meant. Suffixes are affixes that go at the end of words. Down at the bottom, I wrote down the meanings of all the words. I would suggest that you copy this down. That way you can have it as a reference as you complete the worksheet. So the suffix full means full of. The suffix less means without. The suffix ness means quality or state of. And the suffix meant means an action or resulting state. These words and definitions are definitely going to help you when you start to fill out the worksheet. For example, full means full of, and then you can see for number 1, it says full of happiness. So right away, you know that the word is probably going to end in full. Same thing with number 2. Down at the bottom, we have less, which means without, and then number 2 says without end, which means that the answer for number 2 is going to have the word less in it. So definitely writing this down is going to help you complete this worksheet correctly. So once you have written that down, I would then go on to complete the page. So you're going to be using the spelling words numbers 1 through 20. So number 1 says full of happiness. Again, full means full of, so you're going to be using a word that has full. And full of happiness would be cheerful. So then you would write cheerful for number 1. Then you would move on to number 2, without end. Without means less, so then you would look for a word that has less at the end. And without end would be endless. So then you would write that for number 2. And then you would continue on finishing numbers 3 through 11. The next page I'm going to go over is page 234. Page 234 is one that we have gone over numerous times. It's the same one that the children have gotten for sections 1, 2, and 3. The students need to read the paragraph, find the misspelled words, circle them, and then write them correctly with the spelling list. So you would start with, in 1948, Helen Fabula married Cesar Chavez, a man known for his endless work to improve the treatment of migrant farm workers in the United States. So you would start with circling the words that are misspelled, endless, and treatment. And then you would go to the bottom and you would write them correctly. Number 1, endless. Number 2, treatment. And then the children would continue on for 3 to 11. The next page is the grammar page, 235. This page is about clauses. So I'm going to start by explaining what a clause is, telling you some of the important words to look out for, and then I'm going to go through and do a couple of the problems with you. So a clause is a group of words with a subject and a predicate. A subject is what the sentence is about, and the predicate is what the subject does. If a clause can stand alone as a sentence, it is an independent clause. If a dependent clause cannot stand alone, so an independent means it can do it by itself, it stands by itself. A dependent clause cannot stand alone. It needs another part of a sentence to help it make sense. Many dependent clauses begin with transition words such as before, after, since, because, who, whose, that, or which. I would definitely suggest you start by underlining those words because they're going to come up in the sentences. And by knowing what they are, it's going to help you determine what is the dependent clause. So then we have two examples. Since they had no water for crops, they had to leave the ranch. They had to leave the ranch is an independent clause. That sentence could stand alone by itself and it would make sense. Since they had no water for crops is the dependent clause. It cannot make sense by itself. It needs the rest of the sentence to help it make sense. And again, it starts with the word since, and if you look up here, since is one of the transition words. So since they had no water for crops would be the dependent clause. Chavez was the leader that the workers chose. Chavez was the leader is the independent clause. Again, that sentence can stand alone by itself and it makes sense. That the workers chose is the dependent clause. It does not make sense by itself. It needs the independent clause to make it a complete sentence. And again, it starts with the word that, which if you look up here is the transition word that starts the dependent clause. So the directions say that the students need to underline the dependent clause in each sentence and circle the transition word that introduces the dependent clause. So these words up here that you underline are the words that you're going to be looking for in your sentences. So for example, number 1, after they worked long hours, migrant workers had little to eat. So the transition word would be after. So you would circle the word after. And then you're going to underline the dependent clause, which would be after they worked long hours. Because after they worked long hours cannot stand by itself. It needs the rest of the sentence, migrant workers had little to eat. I'm going to skip 2 and 3 because they're very easy to find the dependent clause. Again, by going back up and looking for these transition words to help you. Same thing with number 3. Number 4, I am going to help you with. So number 4 says, until Chavez organized the workers, they had no way to fight back. The transition word would be until, so you would circle until, and then the dependent clause would be until Chavez organized the workers. Number 5, again, look for the transition word to help you. And number 6, I am going to help you with. Number 6 says, a huge cheering crowd met the marchers when they reached Sacramento. The transition word would be when, and then the dependent clause would be when they reached Sacramento. And then the students will be able to do numbers 2, 3, and 5 by themselves. Again, look for the transition word, and then once you find that, you'll be able to find the dependent clause. And then the final page that I'm going to go over today is page 236. Page 236 is on relative pronouns. Some dependent clauses begin with a relative pronoun, such as who, whom, whose, that, or which. These clauses act as adjectives and answer the questions which one or what kind about a pronoun or noun. So I would start by underlining these key words, who, whom, whose, that, or which. Those are the words you're going to be looking for in the answer to try to find the answers. And also I would underline which one and what kind. Those are also going to help you try to figure out what the answer is. There are 2 examples. The dependent clause, California is the state that produces the most fruit crops. That would be the transition word from up here. That produces the most fruit crops is the dependent clause. It tells you which state produces the most fruit crops, that state, which is California. Same thing with the second example. This farm, which grows strawberries, is the largest in the state. Which is the transition word. which grows strawberries, tells what kind of farm it is. This farm, which grows strawberries, is the largest in the state. And then that underlined section would be the dependent clause. So the directions for number 5, 1 through 5, say to circle the relative pronoun in each sentence. Underline the dependent clause, write the noun or pronoun this clause describes on the right. So again, you definitely want to have these words underlined. They are going to be like your key words that help you to figure out what is the dependent clause. So starting with number 1, there was a terrible drought that caused the Chavez family to lose their ranch. So the relative pronoun would be that. And again, it's right up here at the top that you underlined. And then the dependent clause would be that caused the Chavez family to lose their ranch. And then you think to yourself, what caused the Chavez family to lose their ranch? And the answer is a drought. The drought is the noun, and that's what caused the Chavezes to lose their ranch. Number 2, they moved to California, which offered jobs for migrant farm workers. Again, you start by looking for the relative pronoun, which would be one of these words up here that you underlined. I see that the word which is in the sentence, so you would circle the word which, and then you would underline the dependent clause, which offered jobs for migrant farm workers, and then you would go back and think what offered jobs for migrant farm workers, and it would be California, which would be the noun. Okay, and then the students would continue to do the same for numbers 3, 4, and 5. If you have any questions or need additional help, please reach out to Ms. Dussman or I. Thank you.